Hello everyone. So today we're going to look at a recap of our class project and walk through the functions, and I'll guide you to completing the class project, which will help you in your completion of your final project. We have been using Flask as our framework, although we do not want to use framework for this course. We just want something that we can run, but we'll do more of using Python within Flask. So there are many inbuilt functions in Flask that we can use for login register system for everything, but we're not using those ones because this is not a course on Flask, but on learning backend development with Python. Now we only use Flask to just make it easy for you to be able to run and just view what it is that you are doing. In this lesson, we'll focus majorly on backend, which is what this course is designed for, and then we'll look at the functional programming part. When we look at our app file, we created function to, first of all, import Flask, and then we create an instance of the class Flask. When you create an instance, which is this, we name app. This name we have here is just like a shortcut for the name of the application or the package. And this will allow Flask to know where to look for the template and static file. So it's just the convention for you to write it this way. We use function here because we're illustrating functional programming. Now we said static files are in the templates and the static directory. And whenever you want to serve HTML or CSS or JavaScript file, you need to put CSS and JavaScript files in a folder called static. And then you want to put in all of your HTML files in a folder called templates. That must be the name that you will have. So we use Jinja 2 templates to illustrate how to create templates for those of you who want to build a system that has both front and back end. But take note that that is not the focus of the course, and so you can only do the back end functionality of your final project. When we looked at functions, we saw that we can create function for all app functionalities. And we have a utils file here where we try to create functions to do different things. I want to send email, we create a function to, when we call this function, we want it to do something. Functions will take input and then they return an output. And there are different paradigms for using a programming language. Like in Python, you can go the functional programming way. We can also do it in object-oriented way, where we create classes and objects of class. And you can always use a procedural way of doing things. And one example of a procedural language is like C. But we are focusing on the functional way of doing things. In functional programming, we have inputs that will flow through a set of instructions. And each of the function will operate on the set of the inputs, like you see here. We'll put some inputs and then there are procedures that it needs to follow, or there are different operations that the input goes through to produce some output. Now, functional programming discourages functions with side effects. And when we say side effects, we mean that functions that modify an internal state or makes changes that are not clear in the function's return value. But in Python, we have functions like when we use the print statement, that has a side effect. When we use the print function, we don't return a value, but what we do is that we print something to the screen. We output something. Those are exceptions to what functions are supposed to be like. Those are inbuilt functions. But one advantage you'll find with functional programming is the ease of debugging and testing. When you need to change something about how we say, for instance, register users, you just come to the function that controls this, change this, and everywhere this function has been used within the software automatically gets this update that has been changed. Okay? So before we start, the first thing you always want to do when you return to a project or you have your project on a new system is to look at your virtual environment that we created. I always like to delete and recreate. So what I'll do is deactivate, and then I will delete that. And then because I use Poetry for dependency management, it is easy for me to just install all my dependencies at once. But first of all, I need to create the virtual environment. So I'll say Python 3, venv, and then I want to name my virtual environment .venv. You can name it anything you want. I just like using this conventional name. If this is created, you'll see it there, and then you want to activate it. venv/bin/activate. And once it's activated, you'll find it here. Now I want to install all the dependencies. We use Poetry, which means in our Py project or terminal file, we have all the dependencies or the packages that we need to install, or the libraries or the modules that it needs. So what we'll do here after activation is to write Poetry install no root. Now, there is no need to specify no root all the time, but the reason I always do this is that I don't want to have this in error out in such a way that, the no root option will just ensure that the project is not installed as a package every time we install it. And so it just prevents you from having errors, because it wants to look for the README file, it wants to look for the version, and every time it wants to look for these things, and you might start having this installed and then an error message at the end. So we want to prevent that project from installing as a package by specifying the no root flag there. When this is done, this has been created for some time now, and the versions might be higher than this. There might be recent versions we want to update to. We just do Poetry update. And then to update all of the packages that needs to be updated. Once you've done this, you're now ready to move forward. Now we have a models directory with different models we have created, and we use SQL Alchemy as our object relational mapper. The declarative base that we have, we specify this in the init file. Now this init file is just like when you have the init, when you use object-oriented programming in Python, it runs automatically once you call that module. So we want to go to the models directory. This init_.py runs automatically, and that means it just applies to all of these files that are here. In this file, this is common to all of the other model files we want to create, so we'll put it in the init file, so it just automatically runs this all the time. Now what does this do? These are our imports for the libraries or the packages or whatever it is that we need from SQL Alchemy. And then we always want to write this, the class base, declarative base, and we just do this to create a base class that will serve as the database models parent class. We have table name here. This attribute just specifies the table name in the database. Now, one thing we did here is to use this decorator declared attribute. Now, nobody has asked this. I was expecting that someone would want to find out why the meaning of each of this line. But to make you understand when you're creating yours is that when you have this declared attribute decorator, it is just used to define class attributes dynamically within a declarative base class. For instance, let's make it make sense. You see in the class user, for instance, we have this table name users. Because we have this declared attribute decorator here, we don't actually need to specify a name for the table explicitly. It will just create a table name based on the name of the class. So one of the functions of this declared attribute decorator is automatically set the table name based on the class name. So we're going to work with that. Let's say I want to create a new file here. Let me just name this tables.py. And I want all of my classes to be here. So I want to delete these 3 files. So first thing I'll do is to copy all of this from the users and put it here. So I can delete the users table. Now, I don't want this users table anymore. I don't want the name of the table to be users. I want the attributes. I want us to see the functionality of the declared attributes. So I remove that, which now means that based on what I specified here, this table name is going to be converted to lowercase. So the class name is user, which means the table name will now be user in the database once it is created. So we don't need to specify table name once we have this decorator, except if you don't want to have the same class name as your table name. But one of the function of this is for that. Now we have this here. Let's say we want to move the maternity file, we want to delete this. So first of all, let's copy all of this and paste it here. So what I'm doing is just restructuring, and I want to now copy all of these classes and paste them here. So we have this created. We can now remove all of this. Now, some imports are missing. We want to import optional from the typing module. So we say from typing, import optional, and then here we want to import foreign key also. Okay. So here we also want to delete this registration info table name. So it is going to change the name to client reg here. So we can either change this as client reg, or we want to just make it reg info one time, because now the table name is going to be created based on the class name, but in lowercase. We also want to copy, so I'll delete this. We also want to copy this also. So we have this. Let's take this, and we'll take this to the top. And then we want to take all of the classes. So we can start deleting the table names from here. Sorry. Now, here we reference the foreign key pregreg, which was a name we gave the table pregnancy registration here. But because we removed that name, it is going to create a name based on the name of the class, which is going to be pregnancy reg, but in lowercase. So now we have to remember now to change this. Then we want to remove this, and also the name of the table has changed. We also want to remove this name. We also want to remove this. So developing for production, you'll need to clean up your code. Even what I'm doing right now is still not as professional as it should be, but I'll give you a headway for you to be able to research more and do it. It's advisable for you to follow or to focus on the back end in this course, because we are not dealing with the front end for Flask. There are many ways you can do your front end. You can use Jinja to templating. There are different ways you can use different kind of forms to build your products that will be more efficient than writing all your raw Pythons. But we're just using Flask to be able to just start up our app, but we are focusing on using Python on the back end. So I want you to remember that this is not a full Flask course, and so you're not seeing the features of Flask in this demonstration. So we've done all of this. We want to make sure that the tables that have foreign key are all referenced correctly. So this is clients here, and let's see if the clients table is at the top. Here it's there. So we've done all of this correctly. So hopefully We're hoping that everything is done well. We'll delete what we don't need. And when we run this, what we want to achieve is have these tables created based on the class name in lowercase as we specified here using the declared attribute decorator. Now we've done this, we have all the tables. When we come to the utils file, we see that we have different functions we created previously. We have a function to insert record into the table. If you watch the previous lesson, you see when we created these functions. I'm not going to go through this again. And also function to send email to register users. One thing we did not do while we're creating this was to use type hinting. And when we talk about type hinting, it's just specifying the return types. And one of the pre-recorded lessons you watch is to look at the return types when you create functions to specify return type for each of all of these. We want to edit some of these functions. Let us look at this return type. So when we have type annotations on our functions, let's, for instance, use the send email, for example. Let's use the send email, for instance. We have email, we have sender, we have subject, we have body. I have this in my app route here for register, where when we register, we want it to send email, I think. At some point, we use that function. I'm not sure if we use it here. I want to see where we use send email functionality here. Let's see whether we use it anyway. It's okay, we didn't use it here yet. Okay, so but the whole idea is we want to see when we create a user's account, we want to be able to send activation email to the user. And I think we should have used that in the same utils file when we say register users, and then we'll have send email here. When I say email is equal to email, and I put my cursor here, it's really not going to do anything on this part. It's not going to auto suggest, it's not going to help me. But in the event that I come here to say, I want to put a type hint here. The email address is usually a string. I'll put a colon and I'll put string. That's the type of the email. The sender is going to be a string too. The subject is going to be a string too. And then the body is also going to be a string. And then this function, we want this function overall to return. So when it sends the email, it returns a message or return true or false. And so let's say it returns bool. So we specified return types here. If I come back to where I'm using this email, and I now put a dot here, so register user, and then for the register user, I decided to put my email here, string. For my role here, the role of the user is a string, and then the code is also a string, and this also returnable. By the time I come to my app file and I come to register user, and I use the email here, at some point when I put a dot, it should auto suggest all of the methods for that type. So because we have string, we have all the string methods suggesting for me to see capitalize, case fold. So it can easily help me autocomplete because now there is a type hint of what the return type of that particular parameter is. So because we said it's a string, all I get here as auto suggest is string. If the return type was not string, if what I specified as email is not a string, for instance, let's say I use an int, for instance, I only get the methods, the int methods that Python has. So that's one of the functions for return type. Now, when you begin to use things like different checkers and different tests, it want to test for what it returns. If it's not returning the type it's expected to return, you'll get an error, your test will fail, and so it's not ready for production. But we're not doing all of that. When you create functions for production, you want to always specify the return type. You want to put your type annotations or type hints. Depending on the type of standards you have to keep to, you might get errors, especially if you use GitHub Actions. You push this, it will reject the push because you're not keeping to specific standards. Okay, so that's for type annotation. Now we have this, and we already created a WSGI file where we moved what we just clicked to run the application and then get an interface to work with. We want to see how we can develop backend only for an application. We created this tables model and we have the users model, for instance. When someone comes to the home page, let's say we have the home route, they try to register somebody, it goes into the database called user and it stores values into all of these column names. When a client is registered, we also want to store values into all of these columns. Now, if you are a back-end developer, you have no business with the front end. If you learn how to build monolith system where you have the front end and then you look at the names for the input types before you can build the back end, you will not understand how to build back end, and then the front end team will now build the front end. Yeah, you work together, but you build back-end functionalities based on business requirements. You build your database models based on business requirements without waiting for the front end or without waiting for other people, because you know what the model is, what data is to be stored, and how to collect those data, and front end will build upon what you have built. Now we have clients. Let's say, for instance, we want to register clients into the system. We are not going to build a front end for this, but we are going to build a back-end functionality to collect this information and to save it in the database. And I'll show you how to test, back-end functionalities. So how do we do this? Now, first of all, you want to go to your app file, for instance. And before we actually get this done, let's run this to see if our tables are created first, and then we will now come back to build new functionality. So we have, there's an import we need to change on the init file. Sorry, here. Utils file. Here we import users, and I think we've deleted it. So now we're importing tables. That's the name of the file here. So we import tables, which means that we use users throughout here. And so we can just do a search and replace. Everywhere we use users, we want to replace with tables and just replace all. So this is done, and we can now run the file. So once you are refactoring, you want to make sure that you change all that there is to change. So I'll run this, and now it is running. If I come to my database now, and we have no tables, but when I refresh, I should find all those tables created, and they're created based on the class name that we have, but all in lowercase. So we'll find that we have our tables created in the database. So everything is working fine. We want to focus on the backend now. And what we want to do is, let's say we want to focus on the next table here. Let's insert data into the client table. Let's say we register a client, and we have these columns: ID, patient number, first name, middle name. We want to build just backend functionality for this. Let's go to the app file, and then let's create a route for this. After we create a route for this, we want to come back to build a function for this. Or we'll build a function first, then we'll create a route. Either way, but I think I'll build a function first so you can understand. If I do the route before the function, we might not see what we're doing clearly. So we want to have on our utils file now, let's do this properly. We want to have a function. Let's call this function register clients. Now this is going to take the engine, because we're going to be connecting to the database. We want it to take different parameters, and the parameters that it's going to take are going to be all of the different columns of the database table. When we look here, we have patient number, first name, middle name, family name, date of birth, street address. So we're going to put all of this there. So let's start. So we have engine, and then we want to mention them. So we have patient number. We want to pass all of these values. Is of type string. You want to do your type hinting. We have first name is of type string. We have middle name and then family name. Middle name is of type string. We have, let's say, family name is of type string. We have date of birth, street address, date of birth. Let's just put this as type string. Let's not bother about passing date for now. And then we have street address, city, street address. Let's make it string, city, string. We have state, then zip code, I think. State zip code for number. State of type string. Then we have zip code of type string. Then we have phone number of type string. We have email, I think. Email, emergency, name, phone, relations, okay? So we have email of type string. Then we have emergency contact name of type string. We have emergency contact phone of type string. We have emergency contact relation of type string. And then we have emergency contact address. I'll make this of type string. I think this is all it is. So we have all of this. So we try to name them just as the name of the columns of the database to make it easier. The next thing we want to do is want to connect, and we're using Context Manager so that we don't have to explicitly close the connection. So we'll do with engine.connect as con or as connection, whatever you want to name the connection. We want to get the result, and the result will be equal to, we want to insert into the table. So say result is equal to con.execute, and what we are doing is we want to get the name of the table. So the name of the table is client, but we just say tables.client, which is the name of the class, is with an S. Okay, so we have tables.client, so the tables file and the client class. We're trying to get the table name there, which is automatic, and we're running a query select everything from the table where the patient number is equal to this patient number. What this is doing now is trying to check if this patient is already registered, so it doesn't do anything with that, doesn't insert it twice. But if it is not already in existence, then we want to do something. Okay, so I want to select this, and then we'll say if, let's say if result dot row count is greater than 0. After this, I don't know if there's a need to commit, but let's just do that. If not, we'll remove it. So if the result returned is greater than 0, so if it returns any result, it means that the person already exists in the database table. We don't want to duplicate records, and so we return false. If it does not exist, then we want to insert. Now we have a function above here, the insert data function, that helps us to run an insert query. We use the keyword args. If you look at, I think, part 2 of the course where we dealt with keywords and keyword args, you will know how to use this. And all we want to do is, we don't know the number of keyword args the user will specify in advance. We want to be able to use this insert data function regardless of the number of columns or whatever column the user has to specify. So when we use keyword args like this with a double asterisk in front, it means that they can specify any number of keyword arguments, and we want the arguments to be dynamic. So depends on the table that is being created or the data that is being inserted into the table. So we want to use this insert data function. So what we want to do here now is to run the function insert data, and then the argument here is to pass the engine, which we've already created, and then we want to pass the table first. The table is equal to table.clients, and then we want to pass all of the column names here and the values. Now, whatever the client or the user has specified in the argument is what is going to be inserted into the database. So it does not even matter if the name of that variable that is gotten from the form is patient number, and I'll show you that once we get back to the app file. So we have the patient num, we have the first name equal to first name. Then we'll just copy everything from up there. Middle name is equal to middle name. Family name, we have date of birth, we have street address, we have city, state, zip code, and then we have the phone number, the email, all the contacts, and I think this is all correct. And then we're done. Once this insert is done, you want to return true, and then this is done. We've created a function that will register clients when this function is called. And so on the app file now, we want to create a route that when we hit that route, we want to be able to insert record. So we'll say app.route, and the route we want to create is, let's say we want to have a route called clients, for instance, like this, and we want the methods to be. So if you are building back end, you know that the front end people will actually come and create the form where they can get that form to enter the values, and you want to use one route to do that. Or sometimes you just create the post method and they'll create their own route, or they'll let you know the route you have to create later. But it's just easier and more concise to do this. And let's say dev, and let's call this clients. And what we want to do is to check if the request method is post. So if a form is submitted, now this will not work for our use case, so we're going to change it to get shortly. But I want us to be able to work with a situation where the front end is not yet built. So we know that when a form is submitted, it's going to be a post method that will be specified for the HTTP method for that form. If that is post, you want to do this, and the next thing you want to do is to say, let's say form data is equal to request.form. And then you want to now get the values that are filled into the form, and then you say patient num will now be equal to form data dot get patient num, like this. But because we want to test that this is working before we do all of this, so it's specified for all of the values. So when the front end is now building their forms, they will know to put the name of the form field to be the name that you have specified here when you say get here. So front end looks at the back end and knows what to build, or what will be the values for the input field for the front end forms, because that's the value you're collecting here. Now we want to be able to simulate working with back end and inserting into the database, seeing that this is correct first before we go on to do this. We want to remove this, and we want to do this by specifying raw values. So let's use get, because we're going to try to hit the endpoint without submitting a form to insert values. So let's say get like this, and then want to specify values for this. Let's say patient num is equal to, we want to specify, let's just specify a value, ABC 123, And then we want to have first name, middle name, let's say last name. And we have the date of birth. Let's give the street address, the city, the state, the zip code. We have I think we have phone number after zip code, phone number, email. So we have phone number, email, then we have the emergency contact name, then we have the emergency contact phone, then we have the emergency contact relation, and then we have the emergency contact address. So now we have specified values. So normally you know what we're supposed to do, get these values from the form values like this. But now we want to pass in raw values for us to test to see that our function is working. So when we do this, we want to say if call the function that we created here, register clients. So we'll now say if register clients. So if register clients, so to create engine, and the engine is, so we'll say create engine app.config URL equal to true. So this is going to be the name of the engine. Now we have not imported register client here, so we'll come here where we imported util. We want to import the function register client, and if register client, the parameters or the argument you have to pass to this is the engine and then all of the values for the column. So we passed in the engine and then the values that we want to pass in: patient name, first name, middle name, family name, date of birth, street address, city, state, zip code, phone number, email. Then we'll have emergency contact name, phone, relation, and then we'll have emergency contact address here. So we've done that. So we say if this is the case, we're not rendering any templates, we just want to do certain things. So if this is the case, if it goes through, if the function runs correctly and returns true, we want to get, well, let's render a template to just see that it tells us the client has been added successfully. So let's say response, clients registered successfully, and then let's render template response.html response. Else we want to render template. So else we want to have a response. Clients already exist, render templates and the response like this. So we're just using this as the test to see that this works. So normally you write your test, you can use PyTest. This is not the course for that, but I'm just trying to show you this. And the only difference is that your method is going to be post when you submit a form, and then you are getting these values, not raw figures. You're getting these values from the form data that is submitted by using this like this to get all of the values. And then you pass in the variables to the function. Now, if all is well, we should get this message, and then we should be able to go to the table here. The table is clients. One will run it to find the values here. So let's try to run this to see that is working. So I'll just quit first, and then I'll run the WSGI file again, and then I want to come to this route, and then I'll come to /clients. That is the endpoint. Now, when I come to that endpoint, client registered successfully, which means that it should have inserted everything here. So we can see that our logic works perfectly. We've tested it even before building a front end for it. So normally, if you're a back-end developer, this is how your work will be. You have no business building templates and forms. And then we are not building monolith systems. Everybody wants to build an endpoint, and then you have mobile developers building mobile front end that connects to this back end. And so you have to know how to build your back end without a front end and test your back end like this. So once this is working well, this is all working perfectly, you can come to your app file to now create this without the raw data, change the get method to post, and then everything is as it's supposed to be. And then you see whatever you want to render here is what you render, and whatever the front end, if you're sending it to a view, to a form, or to a response, that the front end is going to pick. Okay? Does anyone have any question? Okay, is it understood for those who did course 2 before coming here?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I think this should have answered most of the students' question about functions and how to use functional programming. This gives you an idea to go forward and say you want to create routes to register information. Now, it's not just about looking at this and creating routes. You want to even look at the foreign key to see that this patient number, are these going to be from one form inserting record into these different tables, or are you having different forms for all of these different tables? And these are the logic. You have to have logical reasoning to decide how the design of your system will be. But you can practice by trying to do a function to retrieve this client registration, and based on the client registration, begin to collect more registration information on the. So you can have the form that selects from the client's table to display the demographic information of the clients, and on the same form now is able to collect more information about the registration of the client here. So you can try that out, and if you have any problem, you can book a one-on-one class. And I think this is the last lesson for this course. The final examination will be released by next week. So if there's no question, I'll get the recording available before the end of tomorrow. So thank you everyone, and have a nice weekend ahead.